The rain hammered against my apartment windows at nearly midnight when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps, pause, then 3 more. Adam's signature knock from our college days. I glanced at my phone, confirming the ridiculous hour, and padded barefoot across the hardwood floor of my one-bedroom sanctuary. Adam stood in the hallway looking like he'd been through a hurricane, his usually perfect hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. His overnight bag hung limply from one shoulder, and water dripped from his jacket onto the worn carpet of my building's corridor. "Hey, man," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "I know it's late, but can I crash here tonight?" I'd known Adam for 8 years, since our freshman year at State, and I'd seen him through plenty of ups and downs. But I'd never seen him look this broken. My chest tightened with concern, even as alarm bells started ringing in the back of my mind. Having him here, in my carefully controlled space, was dangerous territory I'd spent years avoiding. Drop a red heart if this hits you as we dive into this story together. Of course, I heard myself saying, stepping back to let him in. What happened? He dropped his bag by the door and ran both hands through his damp hair. "Sarah and I, it's over. Really over this time." He let out a bitter laugh. "Found out she's been seeing her coworker for 3 months. 3 months, James. And I was planning to propose next weekend." The words hit like physical blows. I'd watched Adam and Sarah's relationship for the past 2 years, through all their fights and reconciliations, secretly hoping each breakup might be permanent while hating myself for the thought. She was perfect for him on paper, beautiful, successful, shared his love of hiking and craft beer. Everything I could never be. Jesus, Adam. I'm so sorry. I meant it, despite everything. Seeing him hurt made my chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with my own feelings. "Come on, sit down. Have you eaten?" He shook his head, sinking onto my couch like his strings had been cut. "Haven't really had an appetite. We had this huge fight, and she didn't even try to deny it. Said she'd been meaning to tell me, that she knew we weren't right for each other." He laughed again, the sound sharp and painful. Apparently everyone could see it, but me. I disappeared into my kitchen, grateful for something to do with my hands. The familiar routine of making grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort food from our college days, gave me time to process. Adam was here, in my apartment, looking lost and vulnerable in ways that made my carefully maintained defenses feel paper-thin. My one-bedroom place wasn't large, but I'd made it exactly how I wanted it. Clean lines, minimal furniture, everything in its place. It was my haven from the world, the one space where I didn't have to perform or pretend, where I could be myself without worrying about slipping up, saying the wrong thing, letting someone see too much. Having Adam here disrupted all of that. Every movement felt hyperconscious, every word carefully weighed. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust myself. "Remember when you made this every time I bombed a test?" Adam asked as I handed him the plate. He'd curled up in the corner of my couch, looking younger than his 26 years. "You stress-ate your way through organic chemistry," I said, settling into the armchair across from him. "Safe distance. I was worried you'd make yourself sick. You always took care of everyone." He met my eyes, something soft and grateful in his expression. "Still do." The words settled somewhere deep in my chest, warm and dangerous. I'd been taking care of Adam in small ways for years, covering his bar tab when money was tight, listening to him vent about work stress, celebrating his victories like they were my own. It was the closest I could get to loving him openly. "That's what friends do," I said, aiming for lightness. We ate in comfortable silence, the rain still pattering against the windows. Adam's presence filled my small space in ways I wasn't prepared for. He'd been here before, of course, for game nights and casual hangouts, but always with other people. Always with Sarah, eventually. Never just us, never like this. "I can take the couch," he said when we'd finished eating. "Just for tonight. I'll figure something else out tomorrow." I nodded, already mentally cataloging what I had for breakfast, whether my good towels were clean, trying to distract myself from the reality of him sleeping 20 feet from my bedroom. It pulls out into a bed. Sheets are in the hall closet. We set up the couch together, our hands brushing as we tucked the fitted sheet around the mattress. Each accidental contact sent electricity up my arms, reminders of everything I couldn't have, couldn't want, couldn't even acknowledge. Thanks, James. Really. Adam stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. I don't know what I would have done if you'd said no. You don't have to thank me, I said quietly. I'm glad you came here. The truth of it surprised me. Despite the emotional minefield this created, despite the sleepless night I knew lay ahead, I was glad. Glad he'd thought of me when his world fell apart. Glad I could offer him something, even if it wasn't what I really wanted to give. Later, lying in my bed with only a thin wall separating us, I stared at the ceiling and listened to him breathe. The familiar sounds of another person in my space, the couch creaking as he shifted position, the soft rustle of blankets, felt both foreign and achingly right. I'd spent so long protecting myself from exactly this scenario. Adam was the one person who could unravel all my careful control, who made me want things I couldn't have. I'd built my entire adult life around maintaining boundaries, keeping my feelings locked away where they couldn't complicate our friendship. But here he was anyway, vulnerable and hurting and trusting me to help him pick up the pieces. And despite every warning voice in my head, despite knowing how much harder this would make everything, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. The rain gradually softened to a gentle patter, and somewhere in the early morning hours, Adam's breathing deepened into sleep. I remained awake, hyper-aware of his presence, already dreading the moment he'd leave and my apartment would feel empty again. What was supposed to be one night of offering comfort to a friend had already become something more complicated, something that threatened every careful wall I'd built around my heart. The morning light filtering through my bedroom blinds felt different somehow, charged with the knowledge that Adam was just beyond my door. I'd managed maybe 3 hours of restless sleep, my mind cycling between anxiety and something dangerously close to anticipation. The sound of running water from the kitchen told me he was already awake, and I found myself lying there longer than necessary, trying to prepare for whatever this new dynamic would bring. When I finally emerged, Adam was standing at my counter in yesterday's wrinkled shirt, holding a steaming mug and looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. "Hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to the coffee maker. "I figured I owed you at least breakfast after commandeering your couch." There was something different in his voice, lighter somehow, as if sleeping in my space had lifted some weight I hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. "You don't owe me anything," I said, though I accepted the mug he offered gratefully. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, and I told myself the small jolt I felt was just caffeine withdrawal. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks, actually." He leaned against the counter, and I noticed how naturally he seemed to fit into my morning routine, as if he'd been part of it for years instead of hours. "Your couch is more comfortable than my actual bed." Sarah always insisted on this firm mattress that felt like sleeping on concrete. The casual mention of his ex-girlfriend reminded me why he was here, grounding me back in reality. This wasn't some romantic fantasy. Adam was going through a breakup and needed a friend. I took a sip of coffee and tried to ignore how right it felt to have him in my kitchen, sharing morning quiet and easy conversation. "Speaking of which," Adam continued, running a hand through his disheveled hair, "I know I said one night, but would it be okay if I stayed just a few more days? Just until I figure out my next move. I can pay rent, help with groceries, whatever you need." The rational part of my brain screamed warnings about blurred boundaries and emotional self-preservation. The part of me that had been in love with him for 3 years whispered a quiet, immediate yes. "Of course," I heard myself saying. "Take whatever time you need." The relief that crossed his face was worth the internal panic I felt. "Thank you, James. Really, I don't know what I would have done without you." What followed over the next few days surprised me completely. I'd expected awkwardness, the kind of strained politeness that comes when someone overstays their welcome. Instead, Adam and I fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. He started contributing to the grocery list, writing his items in neat handwriting next to my scrawled requests. We developed an unspoken system for the bathroom in the mornings, timing our routines around each other with an efficiency that spoke to how carefully we were both paying attention to the other's needs. The first evening he cooked dinner, I came home from work to find him standing over my stove, stirring something that smelled incredible. "I hope you like pasta," he said without turning around, and there was something so domestic about the scene that I had to steady myself against the doorframe. I figured I should start pulling my weight around here. We ate at my small table, talking about work and mutual friends, carefully avoiding the topic of Sarah or his living situation. But underneath the casual conversation, I found myself discovering sides of Adam I'd never seen before. Without the constant buzz of his relationship drama, without the need to perform the role of devoted boyfriend, he seemed more himself than I'd ever known him to be. He told me about a book he'd been reading, something philosophical that Sarah had always dismissed as pretentious. His eyes lit up as he explained the concepts, gesturing with his fork in a way that was endearingly animated. I realized I'd never seen him get excited about ideas before, never witnessed this intellectual curiosity that apparently lived beneath his easygoing surface. "Sorry," he said suddenly, catching himself mid-sentence. "I'm probably boring you to death." "Not at all," I said, and meant it completely. "I like seeing you passionate about something." Something flickered across his expression at that. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Sarah used to say I got too intense about stuff like this. Said it wasn't really me." The casual cruelty of that observation hit me like a physical blow. How many parts of himself had Adam learned to hide to keep the peace? How many conversations like this had been shut down before they could flourish? "She was wrong," I said quietly. "This is exactly you." That night we ended up on the couch together, watching a movie Adam had picked, something foreign and complex that I was certain Sarah would have vetoed. I tried to focus on the subtitles, but I kept getting distracted by Adam's presence beside me, the way he leaned forward during tense scenes, how he'd occasionally glance over to gauge my reaction to particularly meaningful moments. When the credits rolled, neither of us moved to get up immediately. The silence between us felt comfortable in a way that surprised me, charged but not uncomfortable. "Thank you," Adam said eventually, his voice soft in the dim light from the television. "For what?" "For letting me just be myself." I don't think I realized how long it's been since I felt like I could do that. The vulnerability in his admission made my chest tight. I wanted to tell him that this version of himself, thoughtful, passionate, unguarded, was the person I'd been hoping to know for years. Instead, I said, "You never have to be anyone else here." Our eyes met across the small space between us on the couch, and for a moment something passed between us that I couldn't quite name. It felt like recognition, like the acknowledgement of something that had been building beneath the surface of our friendship for longer than either of us had been willing to admit. Then Adam cleared his throat and stood up, breaking the spell. "I should let you get some sleep. Early morning tomorrow." As he gathered the throw pillows that had become his nightly ritual, I found myself watching the careful way he moved around my space, how he'd learned the creaky spot in the floorboard by the kitchen, how he automatically turned off the lamp I always forgot about. He was settling in, creating small routines and habits that wove him deeper into the fabric of my daily life. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, lying in bed that night listening to him settling onto the couch, I felt something that might have been contentment if I'd been brave enough to name it. For the first time in years, my apartment didn't feel like a carefully maintained sanctuary designed to protect my heart from exposure. It felt like a home that was meant to be shared. Over the following days, the pattern continued and deepened. Adam started staying up later, and our post-dinner conversations stretched longer into the evening. He'd curl up on one end of the couch while I took the other, and we'd talk about everything and nothing: childhood memories, career frustrations, books we'd loved, places we wanted to travel. During one of these conversations, Adam mentioned feeling like he'd lost himself somewhere in the last few years, like he'd been playing a role that never quite fit. "I keep thinking about who I was in college," he said, staring at the ceiling. "I was I don't know, more curious about things, more willing to take risks." "What changed?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Sarah, I guess. Not that it was her fault entirely, but being with someone who had such strong opinions about who I should be. It was easier to just go along with it than to fight about everything. He turned his head to look at me. Does that make me sound pathetic? It makes you sound human, I said. We all adapt to the people we love. Is that what you do? Adapt yourself for the people you date. The question caught me off guard, partly because it assumed I dated people at all, and partly because the honest answer was that I'd been adapting myself around him for years, just not in the way he meant. I try to be authentic, I said carefully. I think relationships work better when both people can be themselves. That sounds nice in theory, Adam said with a rueful smile. Harder in practice. Maybe you just haven't found the right person yet. Something in his expression shifted at that, became more thoughtful, more searching. Maybe not, he said quietly, and the way he was looking at me made my pulse quicken in a way that felt dangerous. These moments were becoming more frequent. Instances where our conversation would drift into territory that felt loaded with subtext, where glances lingered a beat too long, where the space between us on the couch seemed to shimmer with possibility. I told myself I was imagining it, that my hopeful heart was reading meaning into friendly gestures and natural intimacy between roommates. But then there was the morning I emerged from the shower to find Adam standing in my kitchen shirtless, coffee mug in hand, completely unself-conscious about his state of undress. When he saw me, he didn't immediately reach for a shirt or make excuses. Instead, he just smiled and asked if I wanted breakfast, as if sharing morning coffee while half-naked was the most natural thing in the world. I managed to mumble something about not being hungry and retreated to my bedroom to get dressed, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled on clothes. The casual intimacy of it, the complete comfort Adam seemed to feel in my space and around my body, was doing dangerous things to my carefully maintained equilibrium. That evening, as we fell into our usual routine of dinner and conversation, I found myself studying Adam's face in the warm light of my living room lamp. There was something different about him now, something more relaxed and open than I'd ever seen before. The constant tension he'd carried during his relationship with Sarah had melted away, replaced by an ease that made him seem younger somehow, more like the person I'd first fallen for in college. You seem happier, I said impulsively. I am, he replied without hesitation. Being here, having space to think, it's made me realize how unhappy I was before. Not just with Sarah, but with the whole situation. The person I was trying to be. And who do you want to be now? He considered this for a long moment, his gaze drifting from my face to some point beyond me, then back again. Someone braver, I think. Someone more honest about what he wants. The weight of those words settled between us, heavy with implication. I felt like we were dancing around the edges of something significant, something that could change everything between us if either of us was willing to name it directly. Instead, we sat in comfortable silence, the tension humming between us like a live wire, both of us seemingly content to exist in this space of possibility without forcing it into definition. Whatever was happening between us felt too fragile and too important to rush. The third week of Adam living with me arrived with an October chill that seemed to seep through the windows despite my best efforts with the thermostat. I found myself hyper-aware of every shift in our routine, every small change in Adam's behavior that might signal his readiness to leave. But instead of pulling away, he seemed to be settling deeper into our shared space, his presence becoming more integral to my daily life rather than less. It started with small things. The way he'd begun making coffee for both of us in the morning without being asked, learning exactly how I liked it after just a few days of observation. The way he'd started folding the throw blanket we shared during movie nights, creating this careful ritual around our evening routine. Most notably, the way he'd begun sitting closer to me on the couch, the distance between us shrinking incrementally each night until our knees would brush when one of us shifted position. I told myself I was imagining the significance of these changes, that I was reading meaning into coincidence and proximity. But the rational part of my mind was increasingly drowned out by the growing awareness that something fundamental was shifting between us, something that went beyond the comfortable friendship we'd always maintained. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, a pasta dish that had become one of our reliable standbys, Adam seemed unusually quiet, lost in thought as he stirred the sauce. I was chopping vegetables at the counter beside him, stealing glances at his profile, when he suddenly spoke. "James, can I ask you something personal?" My knife paused mid-chop, my heart rate immediately accelerating. "Of course." He turned to face me, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, the wooden spoon still in his hand. "Do you ever feel like you've been living someone else's life? Like you've been playing a role for so long that you forgot who you actually are underneath it all?" The question hit me with unexpected force, resonating with truths I'd been carrying for years. "Yeah," I said quietly, setting down the knife. "I think most people feel that way sometimes." "No, I mean really feel it," he pressed, his eyes searching my face. "Like you wake up one day and realize that every choice you've made, every relationship you've had, every version of yourself you've presented to the world has been, I don't know, curated for other people's comfort rather than your own authenticity." The intensity in his voice made me turn to face him fully, recognizing something raw and urgent in his expression. "That's a pretty specific feeling, Adam. What brought this on?" He ran his free hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his tell when he was struggling with something he couldn't quite articulate. "Being here with you, I guess. Having space to think without Sarah's expectations or our friends' assumptions about who I'm supposed to be. It's like I can breathe for the first time in years, and that should feel good. But instead it's making me question everything." I wanted to reach out and touch his arm, to offer some kind of physical comfort, but I kept my hands carefully at my sides. "What kinds of things are you questioning?" "Everything," he said with a bitter laugh. "My relationship with Sarah, obviously, but that's just the tip of it. The way I've approached dating, the way I've thought about attraction, about connection, about what I actually want from another person." He paused, his eyes meeting mine briefly before looking away. "About what I want from life in general." The conversation felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, with one wrong word capable of sending us both tumbling into territory we couldn't come back from. But I also sensed that Adam needed someone to witness this moment of questioning, even if I couldn't offer the kind of guidance he was seeking. "That sounds terrifying," I said honestly. "It is," he agreed, "but also kind of liberating. Like, what if everything I thought I knew about myself was just learned behavior? What if the person I've been isn't actually who I am?" The vulnerability in his voice was unlike anything I'd heard from him before, even during our late-night conversations. This wasn't just post-breakup processing. This was someone standing at a crossroads of identity, looking down paths he'd never considered before. "Can I tell you something?" he continued, not waiting for my response. "The night I came here, when you opened the door and just let me in without questions, without judgment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Maybe years. I felt like someone actually saw me. Not the version of me that Sarah wanted, or the version our friends expect, just me." My throat felt tight, and I had to swallow hard before I could speak. "Adam, I know it sounds crazy," he said quickly, as if he was afraid I might cut him off. "And I know I'm probably just projecting because you're being so generous letting me stay here. But I keep thinking about that moment, about how it felt to be seen like that, and wondering why it felt so different from anything I've experienced with Sarah or anyone else." The timer for the pasta chose that moment to go off, its sharp beeping cutting through the charged atmosphere like a blade. We both jumped slightly, the spell of the conversation broken by the return of mundane reality. Adam turned back to the sauce while I moved to drain the pasta, but the tension between us remained, humming with unresolved energy. We ate dinner with lighter conversation, but I could feel both of us processing what had been said, what had been left unsaid, and what territory we'd begun to explore. Adam's questions about identity and authenticity echoed my own long journey toward understanding and accepting my sexuality, but I couldn't tell him that without revealing truths I wasn't ready to share. After dinner, we settled into our usual spots on the couch for a movie, but I was hyper-aware of the way Adam positioned himself slightly closer than usual, his shoulder nearly touching mine as we shared the throw blanket. We'd chosen something light and familiar, a comedy we'd both seen before, but I found myself unable to focus on the screen. Instead, I was acutely conscious of every shift in Adam's position, every moment when his leg would brush against mine, every time I caught him looking at me instead of the television. During a particularly quiet scene, Adam's voice broke the comfortable silence. "James, can I ask you another question?" I turned to look at him, struck by how the soft light from the television highlighted the uncertainty in his expression. "Sure. Have you ever had a friendship that felt like more than friendship, but you couldn't figure out what more meant?" The question sent a jolt of electricity through my entire body. I felt exposed, as if Adam could somehow read the years of hidden feelings written across my face. But his expression wasn't knowing or calculating. It was genuinely confused, searching for understanding. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. "I mean," he paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I mean the kind of connection where you feel more comfortable with that person than you've ever felt with anyone else. Where you find yourself thinking about them constantly, looking forward to seeing them in a way that feels different from normal friendship. Where their opinion matters more than anyone else's, and you catch yourself wanting to share every thought, every experience with them." My heart was pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. "That sounds like it could be a lot of things," I said carefully. "Yeah, but what if it's with someone you never expected to feel that way about?" he continued, his eyes now fixed on his hands rather than meeting my gaze. "What if it's challenging everything you thought you knew about yourself, about what you want, about who you're attracted to?" The air between us felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. I wanted to tell him that yes, I knew exactly what he meant, that I'd been living with that exact feeling for years. I wanted to tell him that the comfort he felt, the connection he was describing, wasn't one-sided. But I also knew that this moment was fragile, that Adam was working through something fundamental about himself, and my role was to be present for that process without making it about my own feelings. "It sounds like you're describing something pretty significant," I said quietly. He looked up at me then, and the expression in his eyes was so open, so vulnerable, that it took my breath away. "James, I think I need to tell you something, but I don't know how to say it without it changing everything between us." My pulse was racing, but I tried to keep my voice calm. "You can tell me anything, Adam. That's what friends do." He shifted on the couch, turning to face me more directly, and suddenly the space between us felt impossibly small. "I think the reason I can't stop thinking about what you said the other night, about feeling like yourself, is because being here with you is the first time I've felt like myself too. But it's not just about having space away from Sarah or our friends. It's specifically about being with you." I could barely breathe. "Adam, I know this is crazy," he continued, his words coming faster now, as if he was afraid he'd lose his nerve. "I know I'm probably ruining everything by saying this, but I can't stop thinking about you. Not just as a friend, not just as someone who's helping me through a rough time. I think about you when I wake up in the morning. I look forward to coming home to you at the end of the day. And when we're sitting here like this, I find myself wondering what it would feel like to." He trailed off, his eyes dropping to my lips for just a moment before meeting my gaze again. The unfinished sentence hung between us like a bridge we could either cross or burn. "To what?" I whispered. Instead of answering with words, Adam moved closer, closing the remaining distance between us on the couch until our knees were touching, until I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His hand moved to rest on the cushion between us, his fingers inches from mine. "To stop pretending that what I feel for you is just friendship," he said quietly. The confession hung in the air between us, transforming everything. All those weeks of wondering if I was imagining the tension, if I was projecting my own feelings onto innocent moments, suddenly crystallized into the understanding that Adam had been feeling it too. That the growing intimacy, the lingering looks, the gravitational pull toward each other hadn't been one-sided. But even as my heart soared with the possibility of reciprocation, my rational mind was spinning with concerns and complications. Adam was coming out of a long-term relationship with a woman, questioning his sexuality for what seemed like the first time. The intensity of his confusion and self-discovery was palpable, and I knew that whatever was happening between us was part of a much larger journey for him. "Adam, I said carefully. I need you to know that what you're feeling is valid, whatever it is. But I also need you to be sure you're not just processing the end of your relationship with Sarah by latching onto the first person who's shown you kindness. His eyes flashed with something that might have been hurt or frustration. Do you really think I'm that shallow? That I can't tell the difference between gratitude and genuine feeling? No, that's not what I mean, I said quickly. I mean that you're going through a lot of changes right now, questioning things about yourself that you've never questioned before. I don't want either of us to get hurt by moving too fast or misreading what this is. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching my face. What do you think this is? The question was loaded with so much hope and vulnerability that it nearly broke my heart. I wanted to tell him everything, about my feelings for him, about my sexuality, about the years I'd spent watching him from a distance and never imagining this moment could be possible. But I also knew that his journey of self-discovery needed to happen at his own pace, not be rushed by my revelations. I think, I said slowly, that you're someone I care about deeply, and that you're figuring out some important things about yourself. I think whatever connection we have is real and meaningful, but I also think it's worth taking the time to understand what it means before we act on it. Adam nodded slowly, but I could see disappointment flickering across his features. So what do we do now? We keep talking, I said. We keep being honest with each other. We give you space to figure out what you're feeling without pressure to define it or act on it immediately. And if I decide that what I'm feeling is exactly what I think it is, he asked quietly. The question sent another jolt through me, the possibility of reciprocation almost too much to hope for. Then we'll figure it out together. He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all evening, and reached over to cover my hand with his. The touch was electric, sending warmth shooting up my arm and straight to my chest. Thank you, he said, for listening, for being patient with me while I work through this mess in my head, for being you. We stayed like that for a moment, his hand covering mine, both of us looking at the point of connection as if it held answers to questions we were still learning how to ask. The movie continued playing in the background, forgotten, while we sat in this new reality we'd created with our honesty. Eventually, Adam squeezed my hand gently before pulling away, settling back into his corner of the couch with the throw blanket pulled up to his chest. But the space between us felt different now, charged with acknowledged possibility rather than unspoken tension. James, he said quietly, his eyes still on the television screen. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I mean, I know I said I'd start looking for my own place, but I'm not ready to leave this yet. Whatever this is. My heart clenched with relief and anticipation in equal measure. I'm not ready for you to leave either. The rest of the movie passed in comfortable silence, but everything had changed. The boundaries of our friendship had been acknowledged as more fluid than either of us had admitted. The possibility of something deeper had been named and honored, and we'd committed to exploring it together with honesty and patience. As we cleaned up and prepared for bed, moving through our established nighttime routine, I was struck by how natural it all still felt despite the seismic shift in our understanding of each other. Adam brushed his teeth while I washed the dishes. We exchanged quiet goodnights, and he settled onto the couch with the extra pillows and blankets that had become his temporary bed. But as I lay in my actual bed, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, I knew that sleep would be elusive. Adam's confessions replayed in my mind, along with the memory of his hand covering mine, the way he'd looked at my lips, the vulnerability in his voice when he'd admitted to questioning everything about himself. The hope that had been carefully contained for so long was now threatening to overflow, but it was tempered by the knowledge that Adam's journey was just beginning. He was questioning his sexuality, his understanding of attraction, his entire conception of what he wanted from a relationship. That kind of self-discovery couldn't be rushed or influenced by my own desires, no matter how much I wanted to tell him that I'd been waiting for him to have these realizations for years. From the living room, I could hear Adam shifting on the couch, the soft sounds of someone who was also having trouble settling into sleep. I wondered if he was replaying our conversation too, if he was feeling the same mixture of excitement and uncertainty that was keeping me awake. The next morning brought an interesting test of how our new honesty would affect our daily routine. I woke before my alarm, as had become my habit, and padded to the kitchen to start the coffee. Adam was already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch with his hair mussed from sleep, looking at his phone. "Morning," I said quietly, not wanting to assume that daylight had changed the tenor of what we'd shared the night before. He looked up and smiled, the same genuine warmth I'd seen when he'd thanked me for listening. "Morning. Did you sleep okay?" Eventually, I admitted. "You?" "Same." He stood and stretched, and I tried not to notice the way his t-shirt rode up slightly, revealing a strip of skin above his pajama pants. "Thanks for the coffee." As we moved through our morning routine, I was relieved to find that the awkwardness I'd feared hadn't materialized. If anything, there was a new ease between us, as if acknowledging the tension had somehow released it rather than amplifying it. Adam hummed while he made breakfast. I caught him watching me read the news with a soft expression, and when our hands brushed as we both reached for the sugar, neither of us pulled away immediately. Over the following days, this new dynamic continued to evolve. Adam seemed more relaxed, more present in our conversations, as if admitting his confusion had given him permission to stop fighting whatever he was feeling. He began sharing more details about his thought process, his questions about sexuality and attraction, his growing awareness that his relationship with Sarah had been missing something fundamental that he was only now beginning to understand. "I keep thinking about the way she used to criticize me for being too emotional," he told me one evening as we prepared dinner together. "She'd say I was too intense about friendships, too invested in connections that didn't matter as much as our relationship. But now I'm wondering if the problem wasn't that I was too emotional. It was that I wasn't emotional enough with her." I paused in my vegetable chopping. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I think I was performing the role of boyfriend rather than actually feeling it," he said, stirring the pan with more force than necessary. "Going through the motions of what I thought a relationship should look like, without ever experiencing the kind of connection that makes all that effort feel natural. And now," he glanced at me, his expression thoughtful, "now I'm starting to understand what everyone means when they talk about relationships being easy with the right person. Not easy like without challenges, but easy like breathing. Like you don't have to think about it because it's just what your body naturally does." The metaphor sent a warm feeling spreading through my chest, especially coupled with the way he was looking at me as he said it. But I was also aware that Adam was still processing, still discovering, and that my role was to be supportive rather than interpretive. "That sounds like an important realization," I said. "It is," he agreed. "And it's also terrifying because it means I spent 3 years in a relationship that was fundamentally wrong for both of us, and I was too caught up in what I thought I was supposed to want to recognize it." As the days passed, I watched Adam become more comfortable with his questions, more willing to examine aspects of himself that he'd never scrutinized before. He began talking about attraction in more nuanced ways, acknowledging that his understanding of what drew him to another person was evolving. "I used to think attraction was just physical," he told me one night as we settled into our usual spots on the couch. "Like you see someone and you either feel that immediate spark or you don't. But being here with you is making me realize that the strongest attraction I've ever felt has been based on emotional connection, on feeling understood and accepted." "That makes sense," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the way my heart was racing. "The thing is," he continued, shifting slightly closer to me, "I'm starting to think that maybe the reason my relationships with women never felt quite right wasn't because I hadn't found the right woman. Maybe it was because I was looking in the wrong direction entirely." The confession hung between us, more direct than anything he'd said before. I felt like we were approaching the edge of that cliff again, the moment where we'd either step back to safety or leap together into unknown territory. "That's a big realization," I said quietly. "Yeah, it is." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "James, can I tell you something else?" "Always. Every night when we're sitting here like this, I find myself wanting to move closer to you. Not just physically, though that's part of it. I want to close whatever distance is left between us and just be close to you in every way possible." My breath caught. "Adam, I know you said we should take things slow, and I understand why. But I need you to know that this isn't confusion or rebound feelings or gratitude. This is me recognizing something I think I've been avoiding looking at for a long time. He moved closer as he spoke, closing the gap between us until his knee was pressed against mine, until I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. What have you been avoiding looking at? I whispered. The fact that the person I feel most connected to, most comfortable with, most attracted to in every way that matters, is you, he said simply. The honesty in his voice, the certainty that had replaced his earlier confusion, took my breath away. But even as my heart soared with the confirmation of reciprocated feelings, I knew we were at a crucial moment that would determine the trajectory of whatever came next. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of this moment settling between us like something tangible. Adam sat beside me on the couch, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, his eyes reflecting a vulnerability I'd never seen before. The air felt charged with possibility, electric with all the things we weren't saying. James, Adam said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say it without sounding completely insane. My heart hammered against my ribs. You can tell me anything. You know that. He shifted closer, turning his body toward mine, and I caught the faint scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. These past few weeks, living here with you, it's been the first time in my life that I've felt like I could just be myself. No pretending, no trying to be what someone else wanted me to be. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming. And I keep thinking about what that means, he continued, his gaze dropping to his hands before meeting mine again. About why being here feels so different. Why being with you feels so different. The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving. I could see the rapid pulse at his throat, could feel my own breathing becoming shallow. Different how? I managed to ask, though part of me was terrified of the answer. Adam's eyes searched my face, and I saw something flicker there, uncertainty, longing, fear. Like I've been sleepwalking through my entire life until now. Like everything before this was just going through the motions. My mouth went dry. The way he was looking at me, the careful weight of his words, the magnetic pull I felt drawing us closer together. It was everything I'd dreamed of and everything I'd convinced myself I was imagining. Adam, I whispered, and his name hung in the air between us like a prayer. He leaned forward slightly, his hand moving to rest on the couch cushion between us, his fingers almost touching mine. I know this is crazy. I know it doesn't make sense. But James, when I'm with you, I feel like I understand what everyone's been talking about all these years. That connection, that feeling of being seen. The distance between us was down to inches now. I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel his breath on my face. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to close the gap, to stop overthinking and just let this happen. I've never felt this way about. He started, then stopped, swallowing hard. I've never felt this way about anyone. The confession hit me like a physical blow. This was it, the moment I'd fantasized about and feared in equal measure. Adam was right there, vulnerable and open, saying everything I'd longed to hear. But beneath the rush of euphoria, a small voice in my head whispered warnings about rebound emotions and confusion and the friendship I'd lose if this went wrong. What are you saying? I asked, though I think we both knew exactly what he was saying. Adam's hand moved closer to mine, our fingers almost touching. I'm saying that I think about you all the time. I'm saying that I've been finding excuses to sit closer to you during our movie nights because I crave being near you. I'm saying that when you smile at me, it feels like the sun coming out. The raw honesty in his voice undid me completely. Without conscious thought, I found myself leaning forward, drawn by a force stronger than gravity. Adam's eyes dropped to my lips, and I saw him lean in too, closing the distance between us with agonizing slowness. This was happening. This was actually happening. Our faces were so close now that I could feel the warmth of his skin, could see the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks. My heart was beating so loud I was sure he could hear it. Another second, maybe two, and we'd cross a line we could never uncross. And then, suddenly, Adam jerked back like he'd been shocked. The spell shattered instantly. He scrambled to put distance between us on the couch, his face flushing red as he ran his hands through his hair. "Jesus," he muttered, not looking at me. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, James. I don't know what I was thinking." The whiplash from almost kiss to sudden rejection left me reeling. "Adam, wait. No, this is exactly what I was afraid of." He stood up abruptly, pacing away from the couch. "I'm such a mess right now. I just got out of a 3-year relationship. I'm crashing on your couch, and now I'm—" He gestured helplessly between us. "I'm projecting or something. This isn't fair to you." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. "You're not projecting anything. What just happened?" Was me being confused and emotional and completely out of line? He interrupted, still not meeting my eyes. "You're my friend, James. My best friend. And I almost just—" The word friend hit me like a slap. I watched him pace, his agitation palpable, and felt the familiar ache of hope being crushed settle in my chest. Had I misread everything? The closeness, the intimacy, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only person in the world? "Look," Adam said, finally stopping his pacing but keeping his back to me. "I think it's time I started looking for my own place. This arrangement isn't working anymore." The words landed like a physical blow. "What?" "Adam, you don't have to." "I do." He turned around, and the careful distance he'd put back in his expression broke my heart. "I've been imposing on you for weeks now, and clearly I'm starting to. I don't know what I'm doing anymore." I stood up, desperate to salvage something from the wreckage of the moment. "You haven't been imposing. I told you, you're welcome here as long as you need." "That's just it," he said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. "I don't want to need this. I don't want to need you." The admission hung between us, brutal in its honesty. I felt something crack inside my chest. "I see," I said quietly, though I didn't see it all. Everything felt upside down and backwards. 5 minutes ago, we'd been moments away from kissing, and now he was talking about moving out because he was afraid of needing me. Adam must have heard something in my tone because his expression softened slightly. "James, it's not. You're an amazing friend. The best friend I've ever had. But I'm clearly not in a place where I can think straight about anything right now." "Friend." There was that word again, wielded like a weapon. "Right?" I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "Of course. You're probably right." The silence that followed was deafening. Adam stood there looking lost and conflicted, while I fought to keep my expression neutral and supportive. The moment that had felt so full of possibility had curdled into something painful and awkward. "I should." Adam gestured vaguely toward his makeshift bed on the couch. "I should probably get some sleep. Early day tomorrow." It was barely 10 p.m., but I nodded anyway. "Sure. Of course." I watched him gather his things with mechanical precision, avoiding eye contact. The easy intimacy we'd built over weeks of living together had evaporated, replaced by a politeness that felt like a wall between us. "Good night, James," he said quietly, settling onto the couch with his back to me. "Good night," I replied, though the word felt like ash in my mouth. I went through the motions of getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth, and changing into pajamas while my mind raced. In the bathroom mirror, I looked exactly the same as I had an hour ago, but everything felt different. The almost kiss played on repeat in my head. The way Adam had leaned in, the heat in his eyes, the careful vulnerability in his voice when he'd confessed to thinking about me. But then the retreat, the panic, the immediate categorization of me as just a friend he'd gotten confused about. The talk of moving out, of not wanting to need me. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of Adam's presence just on the other side of the wall. I could hear him shifting restlessly on the couch, could picture him lying there staring at the ceiling just like I was. The memory of how close we'd come to kissing was burned into my retinas. Another few seconds, and everything would have been different. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe Adam had realized, in that crucial moment, exactly what was about to happen and had been horrified by it. Maybe the idea of kissing me, of being attracted to a man, had scared him so badly that he'd had to immediately shut it down and retreat into the safety of friendship. The thought made my stomach twist with a mixture of disappointment and something that felt dangerously close to shame. I'd been so sure, in that moment, that the attraction was mutual. The way he'd looked at me, leaned into me, spoken about connection and feeling seen, it had felt real. More real than anything I'd experienced in years. But Adam was straight. He'd been with Sarah for 3 years, had never shown any interest in men before this. Maybe I'd been reading too much into his gratitude for friendship and a place to stay. Maybe his emotional vulnerability after the breakup had gotten tangled up with our proximity, and he'd mistaken comfort for attraction. The idea that I'd somehow taken advantage of his confusion made me feel sick. Adam was my friend first, before anything else. If he was questioning things about himself, the last thing he needed was me projecting my own feelings onto him or pressuring him into something he wasn't ready for. But God, the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd said my name, the careful honesty when he'd talked about feeling like himself for the first time, that hadn't felt like confusion or gratitude. That had felt like. I rolled over, burying my face in my pillow. It didn't matter what it had felt like. What mattered was that Adam had pulled back, had immediately started talking about boundaries and finding his own place. He'd made it clear that whatever had almost happened was a mistake, a moment of emotional confusion that he regretted. The worst part was that he was probably right about needing his own space. These past weeks of domestic intimacy had been a kind of torture for me, wanting more while pretending to be satisfied with friendship. Living with him, seeing him first thing in the morning and last thing at night, sharing meals and conversations and quiet moments on the couch. It had been everything I'd ever wanted and completely unsustainable. Because Adam was straight, and I was in love with him. And those two facts were never going to be compatible no matter how many charged moments we shared or how close we came to crossing lines we couldn't uncross. I must have finally fallen asleep sometime after midnight, because I woke up to the sound of Adam moving around in the kitchen. For a moment, I lay there listening to the familiar sounds of him making coffee, and my heart clenched with the knowledge that this routine was coming to an end. When I finally emerged from my bedroom, Adam was sitting at the small kitchen table with his laptop open, scrolling through what looked like apartment listings. He glanced up when I entered, offering a smile that was friendly but carefully contained. "Morning," he said, his tone determinately normal. "I made coffee." "Thanks," I replied, pouring myself a cup and trying to match his casual energy. "Looking for places?" "Yeah, just getting a sense of what's out there." He gestured at the laptop screen. "Probably need to start scheduling some viewings this week." The normalcy of the conversation felt surreal after the intensity of the night before. It was like we'd both agreed to pretend the almost kiss had never happened, to go back to being just friends who happened to be sharing space temporarily. But I could feel the difference in the air between us. The easy intimacy was gone, replaced by a politeness that felt like armor. Adam was careful not to let our hands touch when I sat down across from him. He kept his eyes on his laptop screen instead of meeting mine. The wall he'd erected the night before was still firmly in place. "Find anything promising?" I asked, though the words felt like swallowing glass. "A few possibilities," he replied. "There's a studio in Riverside that's available immediately. It's small, but it would be mine, you know." I nodded, forcing myself to look interested and supportive. "That sounds great. Independence is important." "Exactly." He closed the laptop and finally looked at me directly. "James, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done. Letting me stay here, being such a good friend through all of this. I know I haven't exactly been the easiest house guest." The careful gratitude in his voice was somehow worse than anger would have been. He was already creating distance, already packaging our time together into something finished and appropriate. "You've been great," I said, and meant it. "I'm glad I could help." "I should be able to move out by the end of the week," he continued. "Get out of your hair and let you have your space back." "There's no rush," I lied. "Take whatever time you need." But even as I said it, I knew he was right. The sooner he moved out, the sooner I could start trying to get over him. The sooner I could stop torturing myself with impossible possibilities and go back to the careful, contained life I'd built for myself. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of determined normalcy. We made breakfast together, but the easy conversation was gone. Adam was polite, grateful, and distant. Everything a good house guest should be, and nothing like the intimate friend who had almost kissed me the night before. As I got ready for work, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror and saw the exhaustion written across my face. One night of lying awake, replaying every moment, every word, every almost touch, and I already looked haunted. How was I going to survive the rest of the week? When I emerged from the bathroom, Adam was washing dishes, his movements efficient and purposeful. He looked up when I entered the kitchen, and for just a moment, I caught something unguarded in his expression, a flash of the same longing I'd seen the night before. But then he blinked, and it was gone, replaced by that careful friendliness. "Have a good day at work," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You too," I replied, though I knew he was planning to spend the day apartment hunting. I left for work feeling like I was in some kind of emotional limbo. The almost kiss felt simultaneously like the most real thing that had ever happened to me and like something I might have imagined entirely. Adam's retreat had been so complete, so immediate, that I was starting to question whether I'd misread the entire situation. But I couldn't shake the memory of the way he'd looked at me, the heat in his eyes, the careful vulnerability in his voice when he'd talked about feeling like himself for the first time. That hadn't been my imagination. That had been real. The question was, what did it mean that he'd run from it so fast? The question haunted me for 3 days. 3 days of Adam's careful politeness, of him checking apartment listings on his laptop while I pretended not to notice, of conversations that felt like we were reading from scripts written by strangers. The easy warmth we'd built over weeks had evaporated so completely that I wondered if I'd imagined it all. But I hadn't imagined the way he'd looked at me that night. The way his breath had caught when our faces were inches apart. The way his eyes had dropped to my lips before he'd jerked away like he'd been burned. I kept replaying it, analyzing every microsecond, trying to understand what had made him run. Was it disgust? Confusion? Fear? Or was it something else entirely? Something that scared him because it felt too real, too right? By Thursday morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I'd barely slept, lying awake listening to Adam toss and turn on the couch, both of us pretending we weren't aware of each other's restlessness. The apartment felt like a pressure cooker, filled with everything we weren't saying. I found him in the kitchen, dressed for work, scrolling through his phone with a cup of coffee growing cold beside him. "Find anything good?" I asked, nodding toward his screen. He looked up, and for just a moment, his careful mask slipped. I saw exhaustion there, and something that looked almost like misery before he pulled the expression back into place. "A few possibilities," he said. "There's a studio in Riverside that's not terrible, and a one-bedroom in Mount Washington that might work." Mount Washington, 20 minutes away in good traffic, which meant we'd probably see each other even less than we had before he'd moved in. The thought made my chest tight. "That's good," I managed. "Yeah." He looked back at his phone. "I'm hoping to check them out this weekend. Get out of your hair soon." Out of my hair. Like he was some burden I'd been tolerating instead of the best part of my day for the past month. Like these weeks hadn't been the happiest I'd felt in years. "Adam," I started, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? Don't go? Stay and let's pretend that moment never happened? Stay and let's talk about why you ran. He looked up again, and this time his expression was almost hopeful, like maybe he wanted me to say whatever I was holding back. But then my courage failed me, and I just shook my head. Nothing. I should get ready for work. The disappointment that flashed across his face was so quick I almost missed it. Almost. Work was a disaster. I sat through 2 meetings without absorbing a single word, spent an hour staring at the same email, and finally gave up any pretense of productivity around 3 o'clock. My coworker Lisa knocked on my cubicle wall and raised an eyebrow at the blank document on my screen. "Rough night?" she asked. "Something like that." She perched on the edge of my desk, studying my face with the kind of concern that made me remember why I'd always liked her. Lisa was one of the few people at work who felt like a real friend rather than just a colleague. "Want to talk about it?" she asked. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I almost laughed. If only it were that simple. If only I could just tell her that my secret crush was living on my couch and driving me slowly insane with wanting something I couldn't have. But then I looked at her kind, open face, and something inside me cracked. Lisa had talked about her girlfriend before, casually and without fanfare. She'd mentioned pride events and shared stories about navigating family acceptance. She was safe, I realized. She was someone who might actually understand. It's complicated, I said finally. The best things usually are. I took a breath, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. There's this guy. Her expression didn't change, didn't show surprise or judgment. She just nodded encouragingly. He's staying with me temporarily. A friend who needed a place to crash after a breakup. And I swallowed hard. I have feelings for him. Strong feelings. But he's straight, and I don't think he knows that I'm gay, she supplied gently when I trailed off. The word hung in the air between us. The first time I'd ever said it out loud at work, to anyone in my professional life. It should have felt terrifying, but instead it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Yeah, I said. Gay. And completely screwed because I think I'm falling in love with my straight best friend who's living on my couch and looking for apartments because he wants to get away from me. Lisa was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "What makes you so sure he wants to get away from you?" Because we almost. I stopped, heat flooding my face. Something almost happened the other night. A moment. And he ran. Literally pulled away and started talking about moving out immediately. Huh. She tilted her head. Did it occur to you that maybe he ran because he was scared of what he was feeling, not disgusted by it? The possibility had occurred to me in my more optimistic moments. But I'd been pushing it away, afraid to hope. He's straight, Lisa. He just got out of a long-term relationship with a woman. Sexuality isn't always as black and white as we think, she said carefully. People figure things out at different paces, in different ways. Maybe this is his oh shit moment. His what? She smiled. You know, that moment when you realize something about yourself that changes everything. When you can't unknow what you just figured out. It's terrifying and exhilarating and makes you want to run for the hills all at the same time. I stared at her, my mind spinning. You think that's what happened? I think you won't know unless you talk to him. Really talk to him. About who you are, about what you're feeling, about what that moment meant. And if I'm wrong, if he really is just straight and I make him uncomfortable, then at least you'll know, she said. And you can stop torturing yourself with what-ifs. She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of having that conversation made my palms sweat. I've never told him I'm gay, I admitted. We've been friends for years, and I've never said the words. I've been so careful, so afraid of changing things between us. How's that working out for you? She asked with gentle humor. I laughed, short and bitter. Things are pretty changed anyway. Exactly. So what do you have to lose by being honest? Everything, I wanted to say. But that wasn't true anymore, was it? I was already losing him. He was already pulling away, already making plans to move out and rebuild the distance between us. Staying silent wasn't protecting our friendship. It was slowly strangling it. I don't know how to do this, I said. I don't know how to have this conversation. Start with the truth, Lisa said simply. Tell him who you are. Tell him how you feel. Let him decide what to do with that information. What if he hates me for lying all these years? Were you lying, or were you protecting yourself? I considered that. Both, I guess. Then tell him that too. Tell him why you felt like you had to hide, and why you're choosing not to hide anymore. The idea was terrifying and liberating at the same time. To finally stop pretending, stop carefully editing myself in every conversation. To let Adam see all of me, not just the carefully curated version I'd been presenting for years. What if nothing changes? I asked. What if he's supportive but still straight and still wants to move out? Then you'll have been true to yourself and to your friendship, Lisa said. And that's worth something, even if it's not everything you want. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about what she'd said. By the time I left work, I'd made a decision. I was going to tell Adam everything, about being gay, about my feelings, about why I'd hidden both for so long. I was going to lay all my cards on the table and let him decide what he wanted to do with them. The thought scared me more than anything I'd ever contemplated, but it also felt right. Inevitable, even. We couldn't keep dancing around each other, couldn't keep pretending that tension wasn't crackling between us every time we were in the same room. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home and bought ingredients for Adam's favorite meal, the pasta dish I'd made on his second night that had made him close his eyes in appreciation. If this was going to be our last night as roommates, as friends who didn't have secrets between them, I wanted it to be a good one. Adam was already home when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a stack of printed apartment listings beside him. He looked up when I walked in, and I saw him notice the grocery bags. "You didn't have to cook," he said. "I was going to order pizza." "I wanted to," I said, which was true. "Besides, we should probably use up the food in the fridge before you move out." Something flickered across his face at the reminder, but he just nodded and closed his laptop. "Can I help?" We fell into our familiar rhythm in the kitchen, him chopping vegetables while I started the sauce. But the easy chatter that usually accompanied our cooking was missing, replaced by a tension that made every accidental brush of hands feel electric. "How was work?" he asked eventually. "Weird," I said honestly. "I had an interesting conversation with a coworker." "Yeah? About what?" I glanced at him, taking in the careful casualness of his tone, the way he was focusing intently on the onions he was dicing. "About being honest with people you care about." His knife stilled for just a moment before resuming its steady rhythm. "That's good advice, I guess." "Yeah, I think it is." We finished cooking in relative silence, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. When we sat down to eat, Adam complimented the food, and we made small talk about his apartment viewings, but I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on both of us. Finally, after we'd cleared the dishes and were standing awkwardly in the living room, I couldn't take it anymore. "Adam," I said, "we need to talk." He went very still, like a deer sensing a predator. "About what?" "About the other night. About what almost happened. About why you're really moving out." "I told you, I need my own space." "Bullshit." The word came out harder than I'd intended, and he flinched. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "Look, can we just sit down? Please." He hesitated, then moved to the armchair instead of his usual spot on the couch. The distance felt deliberate, protective, and it made my heart ache. "I have some things I need to tell you," I said, settling on the couch and trying to keep my voice steady. "Things I should have told you a long time ago." "James, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." I looked at him directly, forcing myself to hold his gaze. "I'm gay, Adam." The words hung in the air between us. Adam's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, something that might have been relief. "You're—" he started, then stopped. "Gay? I have been my whole life. I've never told you. Never told most people, actually." He was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared," I said simply. "Scared of how you'd react, scared of losing your friendship, scared of changing the dynamic in our group. And because—" I took a shaky breath. "Because I've had feelings for you for years, and I knew that if you knew I was gay, you'd figure out that I was attracted to you, and I couldn't handle that rejection." Adam's eyes widened. "Years? Pretty much since we met," I admitted. "I know you're straight. I know you just got out of a relationship with Sarah. I know this is probably making you incredibly uncomfortable. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I can't keep hiding who I am, especially not from you." "You think I'm straight," he said quietly. "Aren't you?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly young and uncertain. "I thought I was. I mean, I've only ever dated women, only ever been attracted to women. Until—" my heart started beating faster. "Until what?" "Until I moved in here." He looked up at me, his eyes vulnerable and confused. "Until I started spending all this time with you and realized that what I was feeling wasn't just friendship. Until I found myself wanting to be closer to you, wanting to touch you, wanting—" He trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. I could see it in his face, the same longing and confusion I'd been carrying for weeks. "The other night," I said carefully, "when we almost—" "I wanted to kiss you," he said in a rush. I wanted it so badly I could barely think straight. No pun intended. And then I realized what that meant, what I was feeling, and I panicked. Because I don't know how to be this person, James. I don't know how to want something I never thought I could want. We stared at each other across the space between us, both breathing hard like we'd just run a marathon. The truth was finally out there, raw and terrifying and beautiful. "So you're not moving out because you're disgusted by me?" I said. "God, no." He laughed, short and breathless. "I'm moving out because I'm falling for you and I don't know what to do about it. Because every night I lie on that couch and listen to you breathing in the next room and want to go to you so badly it physically hurts. Because I'm scared of these feelings and scared of what they mean about who I am." "And what do they mean?" I asked softly. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't know if I'm gay or bi or just James sexual. I don't know how to label it or explain it to my family or navigate being with a man when I've never even thought about it before. All I know is that being here with you has been the most natural, comfortable, right thing I've ever experienced. And that terrifies me." I wanted to go to him, wanted to close the distance between us and hold him while he worked through this revelation. But I forced myself to stay put, to let him process without pressure. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," I said. "You don't have to have labels or explanations or a 5-year plan. You just have to be honest about what you're feeling." "I'm feeling like I want to stay," he said quietly. "Not just tonight, not just until I find an apartment. I want to stay and see what this is between us. But I'm also terrified of screwing it up, of hurting you if I can't be what you need." "What I need," I said, finally standing and moving closer to him, "is honesty. What I need is for you to stop running from this and start talking to me about it. We can figure out the rest as we go." He looked up at me as I stopped in front of his chair, his face open and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "I don't want to lose you," he whispered. "You won't," I promised. "Whatever happens, whatever this becomes, you won't lose me. But we have to be brave enough to find out what it could be." He reached up tentatively, his fingers brushing mine. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm, and I saw him feel it too in the way his breath caught. "I want to be brave," he said. "I want to try." The silence stretched between us, heavy with possibility and terror. Adam's words hung in the air. Asterisk, I want to be brave. I want to try asterisk. And I felt my heart hammering against my ribs like it might break free entirely. This was the moment I dreamed of and dreaded in equal measure, the precipice where everything familiar fell away and left us standing in uncharted territory. "I don't know what I'm doing," Adam continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt this way about anyone, let alone another man. But James, what I feel when I'm with you, it's stronger than anything I ever had with Sarah. It's terrifying and confusing, and I keep thinking I should run, but I can't. I don't want to." I searched his face in the dim light of the living room, looking for any sign that he might bolt again. His eyes were wide, vulnerable, like he'd just stripped away every defense he'd ever built. The Adam I'd known for years, confident, sure of himself, always knowing exactly what he wanted, had been replaced by this raw, uncertain man who was offering me his heart with trembling hands. "You don't have to have it all figured out," I said softly, fighting the urge to reach for him. God knows I didn't when I first realized I was gay. I spent years trying to convince myself I was just confused, that it was a phase, that if I just tried hard enough, I could be what everyone expected me to be. He shifted closer on the couch, the movement so slight I might have imagined it. "How old were you when you knew?" 16, maybe 17. There was this guy in my chemistry class, Marcus Rodriguez. I told myself I just admired him, wanted to be like him. But then one day he smiled at me, and I felt like I might pass out right there in the lab. I laughed, but it came out shaky. It took me 2 more years to even say the word gay out loud, and another 3 before I told anyone else. "Were you scared?" "Terrified. Not just of other people's reactions, but of what it meant for my life. Everything I'd imagined for my future suddenly looked different. Dating, relationships, family, it all had to be reimagined." I met his eyes. But you know what the scariest part was? Admitting to myself that I'd known all along. That all those years of trying to be someone else were just wasted time. Adam was quiet for a long moment, processing. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I keep thinking about my parents, my friends, everyone who thinks they know me. What they'll say when they find out when they find out about this. You don't owe anyone an explanation about who you are," I said firmly. And you don't have to label yourself if you're not ready. This thing between us, whatever it is, it's ours. No one else gets a vote. He looked at me with such gratitude that my chest tightened. I've been lying awake every night thinking about that moment on the couch, when I almost kissed you. I've replayed it 1,000 times, wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to just do it. The admission sent heat flooding through me. I've thought about it too. I was so sure I'd imagined the whole thing, convinced myself you were just being friendly and I was reading too much into it. God, no. James, the way you looked at me that night. I wanted to kiss you so badly I could barely breathe. But then panic set in and I started thinking about what it meant, what people would say, what Sarah would think if she found out. I got so scared I could barely function. And now, he took a shaky breath. Now I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of losing this. Of losing you. These past few weeks living here, getting to see who you really are when you're not putting on a show for everyone else. It's been the most real thing in my life. I didn't even know I was performing until I moved in here and finally felt like I could just be myself. I felt tears prick at my eyes. You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that. Not just about us, but about feeling like you could be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted for you. I know. I can see it now, the way you've been taking care of me, making space for me to figure things out without pushing. Even tonight, when you told me how you felt, you didn't ask for anything back. You just gave me the truth and let me decide what to do with it. Because that's what love is, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop it. We both froze, the weight of it settling between us. I mean, you love me. His voice was soft, wondering, like he couldn't quite believe it. I closed my eyes, feeling exposed and vulnerable. I've loved you for years, Adam. Not just as a friend, though that too. I've been in love with you since before I even understood what that meant. Watching you with Sarah, pretending to be happy for you when inside I was dying. It nearly broke me. But I couldn't risk losing your friendship, so I kept it locked away. When I opened my eyes, he was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. For a moment I thought I'd gone too far, revealed too much too soon. Then he reached out, his fingers finding mine in the space between us. I think I love you too, he whispered. I don't know what that means yet, or how to navigate it. But what I feel for you, it's bigger than anything I've ever experienced. It's like you said about that guy in chemistry class. Being near you makes me feel like I might pass out, but in the best possible way. His thumb traced across my knuckles, the simple touch sending electricity up my arm. I need you to know something, though. I'm probably going to be a mess about this. I'm going to have moments where I freak out, where the weight of changing everything about how I see myself feels impossible. I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't want to pretend I'm not terrified. We'll figure it out together, I said, squeezing his hand. There's no rush, no timeline we have to follow. We can take this as slow as you need. What if I can't be what you need? What if I'm too confused, too scared? Then we'll work through it. Adam, I've waited this long. I'm not going anywhere just because it gets complicated. Besides, you're already everything I need. You're kind and funny, and you make me feel seen in a way no one else ever has. The rest is just details. He lifted our joined hands, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles that made my heart skip. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You deserve to be loved exactly as you are, confusion and fear and all. And you deserve to love whoever makes you happy, regardless of what anyone else thinks. We sat there in the quiet for a while, hands intertwined, both of us processing the magnitude of what had just happened. The apartment felt different now, charged with possibility instead of tension. The secret I'd carried for so long was finally out in the open, and instead of destroying everything, it had created space for something beautiful to grow. So what happens now? Adam asked eventually. Now we take it one day at a time. You're questioning your sexuality, figuring out who you are. I'm learning how to be vulnerable with someone I care about. We'll probably make mistakes, have difficult conversations, face challenges we can't even imagine yet. But we'll do it together. I want to kiss you, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out in a rush. I've wanted to for weeks, but I was too scared. Now I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of not doing it. My breath caught. Are you sure? Instead of answering with words, he shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup my cheek. His thumb brushed across my skin, and I leaned into the touch, my eyes fluttering closed. "James," he whispered, and when I opened my eyes, his face was inches from mine. "Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. Thank you for giving me space to figure this out. Thank you for loving me even when I was too blind to see it. Thank you for staying," I whispered back. "Thank you for being willing to try." He closed the distance between us slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I've been waiting for this moment for years, and nothing could have made me move. When his lips finally touched mine, soft and tentative and perfect, I felt like every broken piece of my heart was suddenly whole again. The kiss was gentle, questioning, full of wonder and nervousness and hope. When we broke apart, both of us breathing hard, Adam rested his forehead against mine. "That was," he started, then trailed off, shaking his head in amazement. "Yeah," I agreed, understanding exactly what he couldn't put into words. "I want to do that again," he said, making me laugh. "We have time," I assured him. "We have all the time in the world." The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Adam moving quietly around the kitchen. For a moment, I lay still, wondering if the previous night had been a dream. But then I touched my lips and remembered the gentleness of our kiss, the way Adam had looked at me afterward like he was seeing me for the first time. I found him standing by the window, holding 2 mugs and watching the sunrise paint the city in soft gold. He turned when he heard me, and his smile was different now, open, unguarded, real. "I didn't know if you'd want space this morning," he said, offering me a mug. "But I hoped you wouldn't." "I don't want space," I said, accepting the coffee and the warmth that came with standing close to him. "But I want to talk about what this means. What we want it to mean." Adam nodded, settling onto the couch and patting the space beside him. Not the careful distance we'd maintained for weeks, but close enough that our knees touched. "I've been thinking about that since I woke up. Actually, I barely slept. My mind keeps racing. Good racing or terrifying racing? Both." He laughed softly. "James, I need you to know something. What I'm feeling, what happened between us last night. It's not some rebound thing or confusion about Sarah. That relationship ending wasn't the catalyst for this. It was the excuse I finally had to stop running from it." I set down my mug, turning to face him fully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been running from feelings about you for longer than I want to admit. Maybe not consciously, but there were signs. The way I always looked forward to seeing you more than anyone else. How I'd find excuses to text you or hang out. How I felt jealous when you'd mention other guys you were interested in, even though I told myself it was just protective friendship." My heart stuttered. "You were jealous?" "Ridiculously so. Remember Marcus from your book club? I spent an entire dinner trying to find reasons why he wasn't good enough for you." Adam ran his hands through his hair. "I convinced myself it was just being a good friend, but looking back, I think I was protecting something I didn't want to admit I wanted for myself." The revelation felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. All those moments I dismissed as wishful thinking suddenly took on new meaning. "So what do we do now?" Adam was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on his jeans. "I need to be honest about something. I'm scared, James. Not of you, not of this, but of how much I don't know about myself. I'm 32 years old, and I'm just figuring out that I might not be who I thought I was. That's terrifying." "It doesn't have to be," I said gently. "You don't have to figure everything out at once. You don't have to put a label on anything or make grand announcements. You just have to be honest with yourself about what feels right. And this feels right," he said immediately. "Being here with you, having this conversation, thinking about a future where I don't have to pretend or perform or be someone I'm not. It all feels more right than anything has in years." "Then that's enough for now." Adam turned to face me fully, his expression serious. "But I need you to know that I can't rush this. I need time to understand what this means for me, for my family, for the life I thought I was building. Is that okay? Can you be patient with me?" "Adam." I reached for his hand, intertwining our fingers. "I've been patient for years without even knowing there was hope. I can be patient now, knowing there is." Relief flooded his features. "I don't want to move out. I know I said I was looking for a place, but I don't want to. Not unless you want me to. I don't want you to either. But if you stay, It has to be different. Not because you need a couch to crash on, but because you want to build something here. With me. I do want that. His thumb traced across my knuckles. I want to wake up and make coffee for both of us. I want to split the grocery shopping and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. I want to fall asleep knowing you're here and that this is real. What about work? Your friends? Everyone who knows you as the straight guy who dated Sarah? Adam considered this. I'll figure it out as I go. Maybe I'll tell people I'm figuring things out. Maybe I'll just let them draw their own conclusions when they see us together. I don't need to have all the answers right now. And Sarah? I called her last night, after you went to bed. I told her I was sorry for not being honest with her or myself, and that I was figuring some things out. She said she'd suspected something wasn't right between us for months. She deserves someone who can love her the way she deserves, and I couldn't be that person. I squeezed his hand. That must have been hard. It was necessary. He brought our joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. Just like this is necessary. James, I can't promise I won't panic sometimes, or that I'll always know what I'm doing. But I can promise I want to figure it out with you. That's all I need. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up below us. The apartment that had felt too small with the weight of secrets now felt like it could expand to hold all our possibilities. So, Adam said eventually, a smile playing at his lips. Want to make breakfast together? As whatever we are now. Partners, I said without hesitation. We're partners now. Partners, he repeated, like he was testing the word. I like the sound of that. As we moved into the kitchen together, I realized this wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of something I'd dreamed about but never dared to hope for. A love built on friendship, honesty, and the courage to be authentic. Whatever came next, we'd face it together.